And I have one of those calendars that tells you what we're celebrating each day. And apparently today is Patriot Day. And I thought, well, now what does that actually mean? I mean, I kind of know the definition of the word, but I looked it up, and it was started after the Revolutionary War to celebrate all the battles. And you know, a lot of people have recreations of the Civil War battles, and I never quite know what the joy is in recreating a battle. We've got enough conflict in the world, right? But maybe it's to help them process it out. I don't know. Anyway, it also said underneath that, it's Grandparents' Day. Now that sounds like a lot more fun, doesn't it? How many grandparents do we have here? All right, lots of grandparents. Good day to celebrate. So that's what I thought we'd do today. And you know, Michael and I, one of the many times we visited his family, they like to go for rides and look for their ancestors in old ancient cemeteries. And so we did that one day with his twin sister. And at first I was a little concerned because some of these places were on dirt roads that were no longer roads. And after going for miles, wondering if that road was ever going to get somewhere, I looked at Michael and said, next time we take your car on these roads down. But we got there and it was this beautiful cemetery. And the trees were huge because it was so old. And you know, they had Civil War gravestones and just ancient. And you know, we just had fun that day finding ancestors and just feeling the peace that an old ancient cemetery can bring. We also, when we took a trip to Frankfort, Kentucky, they have a huge cemetery that overlooks the whole city. I don't know if any of you have been there. It's noted for Daniel Boone having his gravesite there. And that's a beautiful cemetery as well. I know this sounds strange, but to spend a vacation in cemeteries can be quite pretty. And they had a statue of a Civil War Confederate officer, and all his men were in a circle around him that had died in battle with them. I was very touched by that. So anyway, what does this have to do with anything today? Well, today I thought we would honor the gifts of our ancestors, both those in our families and our religious ancestors, our spiritual ancestors. And as well as honoring them, we need to decide what we're going to keep, what gifts are we going to keep, and what gifts do we want to let go of. Got that? Because anybody here not grow up in a dysfunctional family? There can't be. I don't think one exists. You know, we put the fun in dysfunctional. That was the good thing about our family. But my grandparents were second generation from Luxembourg in Germany, a little bit of Belgium. And they lived in a farming community, mostly Luxembourg. And they went through the wars. They went through the Great Depression. They didn't have television, computers, or modern appliances. I remember when my mother got her first clothes dryer, and you know, as kids were already raised, and wow, she thought that was the best thing ever, putting clothes in a dryer instead of, this was in Minnesota, when you hang clothes, it's cold. But my family did have a great sense of humor, no matter what was going on, an abundance of nature, and all the food we could eat, for homegrown food. I don't think you can say you're poor if you have enough to eat, and that was the nice thing about living on a farm. We always had enough to eat. And so there's some of the gifts that I was raised with that I'm going to keep. And there's others that I try to let go of. Now, I'll give you an example. See my profile? See this nose? This nose has a history that goes back generations to my great-great-grandfather, John Nicholas, who was from Germany, so his real name was Hans Nicholas. Now, Hans Nicholas had the same nose, and when it gets cold in the winter, it starts to drip. It just drips whenever it wants to. And we call it the Hans Nickel drip. And it got passed from my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my mother, myself, and I passed it on to my son. He's so proud of his Hans Nickel drip. Now, we can't change that. Maybe plastic surgery, I don't know. We can't change that. But we can change the lack consciousness that came out of growing up in the Depression that they carried. Anybody here have ancestors that grew up during the Depression? And didn't that affect you growing up? I mean, my mother had enough food in her freezer. If the world ever came to an end, everybody could go to her farm, you know. She never threw anything out. She used plastic bags, everything over and over again. I do want to keep my parents' work ethic. They had a strong work ethic. I want to keep their ability to find humor. It's a little harder to let go of my dad's love for sweets and sugar. And when he ate with gusto. Oh, he just ate with gusto. And I haven't been able to let go of that either. I don't know why. I tried. You all know the story the first time I ate at Michael's family. And they were taking it slow and easy from the South, and I was done before they even started. And I just can't seem to break that. But you see, the point I was saying is our generation is a generation to break patterns, to break out of old patterns, both in our families and in our churches and our spiritual lives. And we have to choose, what are we going to hold on to, and what do we need to let go of? One more example is, I grew up in a German family, and Germans aren't noted for being lovey-dovey, My parents loved us, but they didn't show it. We didn't get hugs, or they didn't run around telling us they loved us all day. Although we knew they probably loved us, they just didn't say it. And so when we had our children, all my sisters and I, we went the other extreme, at least I did in my family. And then one neighbor kid came over one day, and she said, God, it takes you about a half hour just to say goodbye to each other in the morning before school, because everybody had to hug everybody, and everybody had to say, I love you. She was wishing she had that too, I think. So, that's what I mean. You have to decide what you're going to keep and what you're going to change. And especially when it comes to religious dogma and religious abuse. Anybody here feel like you had a little bit of religious abuse growing up? I mean, I was, programmed with hell and damnation. I was scared out of my mind. That's abuse. And we have to let go of that. The truth that our grandparents and religious leaders passed on to us do not have to be lost. We don't have to lose the truth. When we stop the false beliefs from being passed on generation to generation. For example, the Bible, a verse that talks about the sins of the father. And that has been so misinterpreted to say, if you do something wrong, there's a God out there that's going to punish you, not just you, but for generations. That punishment is going to go on. Who came up with this stuff? Who came up with this? We have to let go of a sadistic, punishing God and keep the true beliefs that Jesus taught. God is love. You are one with the Father. The truth will set you free. Repeat with me if you're comfortable. I can filter what is passed down to the next generation. Together, I can filter what is passed down to the next generation. Especially religious abuse. You don't have to blindly follow that idea of hell and damnation and punishment. And the church I grew up in, we actually had to ask the priest permission every time we wanted to do something. And I've always wondered, as many years as I've been a minister, nobody's ever asked me for permission. Unity people don't ask me for permission. I don't even want that responsibility. But, it's kind of funny when you think about that. Everything. Let's go to the priest, see what the priest says. God, who cares, So you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I often complain about the religion that I grew up in, but you know what? I chose to keep the really strong faith that my parents had. Some of it was a little warped, but they had a strong faith. They believed in miracles. They believed the impossible could happen. They believed in the power of prayer. And that I've held on to. And even in the Bible, there's a whole chapter where they're honoring what their ancestors held on to. For instance, in Hebrews 11, it says, by faith, Enoch was taken to heaven so that he would not see death. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned about things not yet seen, prepared an ark to save his family. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden by his parents for 3 months. They were not afraid of the king's command. So you see, they're honoring the faith of their ancestors, even though that understanding keeps evolving. And we now have to not only honor that, but include letting go of what is not true or what is abusive, letting go of that so the next generation doesn't have to carry that. For instance, anybody raised with a victim consciousness, oh man, is that one tough to let go of? You feel powerless. Where Jesus said, know the truth and the truth will set you free. The power is within us. So we choose to have faith in the power within rather than the victim consciousness. And then there's guilt. Oh, don't get me started on guilt. I love the saying, guilt is an evolutionary hangover, and I really believe that. It's the gift that keeps on giving, honey, isn't it? And I know I was raised with guilt. The only way I knew I had a good time was if I felt guilty afterwards. Were you raised that way? Was I the only one? And you know you grew up Catholic if you go to a movie theater and you still want a genuflect before you go down the aisle of the movie theater. You like that one? And you know you were raised Catholic for watching Star Wars and they say, the force is with you, and you all want to say, and also with you. Yeah, there's a few of you here that were raised like that. So repeat with me again if you're comfortable. I break the chains that bind me together. I break the chains that bind me. I rise above the beliefs and patterns I was born with together. I rise above the beliefs and patterns I was born with. I embrace the truth that sets me free together. I embrace the truth that sets me free. It's as simple as that and as hard as that. You know, truth stands the test of time, real truth. And through all the archaeological digs, I mean, we found the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Dag Hammadi, and so even though the truth stays the same, the understanding starts to change. The understanding evolves. So wait a minute, we need to look at that a little differently than they looked at it way back when. And we can keep some of it. One of my favorite Old Testament prayers, Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. And we say the same thing almost every Sunday. What do we say? There is only one presence, one power, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. They knew that back then, but somehow it got all distorted. God is love. And we are love. We are a part of that presence and that power. And the people that are the ancestors of this church, that founded this church, started as a book study and grew into this. They were so dedicated and their faith was so strong. And the understanding of the truth that built this church still continues to evolve, but the dedication and the faith stays the same. So today, we honor all who have gone before us, both our family ancestors and our spiritual ancestors. We choose what to keep, and we choose what to let go of. Let's take that into prayer. Just close your eyes for a moment, and maybe take a moment to bring to mind in your heart those who have gone before you, who shaped your life, made you who you are. Both in your family and in your spiritual life. I have both physical family and I have a spiritual family heritage. And I accept from each one of them what I love about each one of them, what has blessed me from each one of them. And I release and let go from each one those parts that maybe I don't want to carry on, that maybe are not empowering enough. I accept and I release. I accept and I release. And I rise up in consciousness on the wings of grace. And collectively we say, so it is, so it is. Amen.